I started my professional career about 20 years ago in London as a chartered mechanical engineer working in building services. So I kind of lived and breathed this stuff for quite a long while and can relate to some of the problems and issues that people have talked about today in terms of things not working, things not fitting, and a whole range of issues we've got up there about risks and uncertainty, complex supply chains increasingly. You know, we're not just bidding traditionally. We're having to put together complex supply chains where we're sharing information and resources, and it's open book and it's partnering. A whole range of issues that make this stuff more difficult. And let's not forget, you know, we're in business. We're about delivering assets for clients, whether it's delivering it to a main contractor or delivering it to an end user client that will operate a building for a number of years. We're not in business to do BIM or to do collaboration or to do the techie stuff. You know, we're about doing our day jobs of delivering assets for people that want an asset, a building. So I'm sure we can all relate to these issues. And what are some of the things that contractors want? When I meet these people around the world in different countries, you know, ultimately they want to figure out what to build. So as Paul's saying, we're on site, we've got something to deliver. What is it we build? Where do we build it? We need to optimize how to build it. So we talk about optioneering nowadays and buildability. Many of the time I've sat down with a contractor on site and they look at designers' drawings and just say, but why have they designed it like this? You know, this is not the most effective way to do it. It could be done better. Now IPD can help to solve some of those issues where the contractor and designer sit together and jointly develop a solution. But it's still a big thing for the industry. Need to know who needs what, when and in what format. And again, this is picking up some of the themes that Paul was talking about. You know, contractors are not about doing modelling or doing design necessarily. It's actually doing things like design review, construction reviews, buildability assessments, and so on. Understanding what got built. The big one is obviously as built. You know, what did get built? The last day of the contract. What do we give over to the operators, to the owners, to maintain the asset? And what sort of format's it in? And then automating IT. You know, we can't get away from it. IT is a very big part of what we do in the industry now. And I'll just make a quick advert for Comet that some of you may be involved in. It's a group that started in the UK, and it stands for Construction Opportunities for Mobile IT. And it's bringing together specialist suppliers, contractors, clients, users, and getting them to use some of this clever new technology, things like GPS, RFID tags. And the group's just started in Australia. So I'd encourage you to look at the website, to join up to that and participate in really developing systems and processes that help you as an organisation. Just want to touch on the BIM hype. There's an awful lot of hype around in the industry. You know, you can't open a magazine or journal or sometimes even the financial pages now without its BIM is splashed all over it. People are saying, we use BIM, we save 10%, we did this, we did that, it's fantastic. But there's a well-recognised hype cycle that applies to things like mobile phones, internet shopping. Something new comes out like BIM, and there's a huge amount of expectation. Call it the peak of inflated expectation, where people come to a presentation like this, they see a great sexy video, what some people call Hollywood BIM. They think that's great. They go back and they spend thousands of dollars on a package of BIM, or millions of dollars in some cases. But they quickly realise it doesn't actually do them any good. It doesn't live up to the hype. You know, they install this thing on a big shiny machine in the corner, and it doesn't create their drawings automatically. They still get clashes on site. They can't set things out on site properly. So they've invested this time and effort. And in fact, some designers and contractors I talk to say they're spending many more times the amount of money to produce drawings or construction documentation using 3D tools, using BIM, than they were using 2D. So it's a big issue. Now, as we all know, BIM does give us benefits. You know, it does do some great things, but you have to work at it. So gradually people understand what it can do, and you reach a point when it's actually giving you some benefit. Now, it could be that you're just doing 3D clash detection, it could be setting out on site, it could be cost estimating, any number of things that work for you as a business. But it's important to understand it's what it does for you individually, not just this great big panacea of BIM. So the trick is to try and go from the somewhere halfway up on the left-hand side before you get to the peak and kind of head off to the plateau. So what do we usually do as an industry? Well, we use 2D. Okay, we've used 2D paper for years. Increasingly, we're using electronic paper, so we'll issue PDFs, but essentially we're just doing 2D. So we start off with the designer. The designer hands a whole pack of paper across to the contractor, and the contractor then sits on site, makes sense of this box of paper, or tries to build the building. And at the end of construction, passes across a room full of paper, boxes, plan chests, brochures, everything else, all goes off to the poor FM guy, who on day one of the contract opens up boxes and finds he's got the contractor's holiday brochures and memos and all sorts of things stuck in a box that's marked handover information. And we know it doesn't work. Again, without going into detail, we all know the issues about that, about passing information around the supply chain, where it doesn't work. And this, again, this figure, it's another waste figure. You know, pick a number, really. This was in The Economist magazine a couple of years ago, where they looked at global projects. And they said typically 30% of the project cost is waste. Now, some of that is rework, but a lot of it is in things like variations. It's in the fact that things, you know, go missing. There are errors in drawings, in site works, all sorts of things, but this all gets hidden in contingencies and extras and revised programs. But there's a lot of money in there that shouldn't be in there. And there was a report from the organisation called NIST in the United States a couple of years ago. It's quite a thick document. It's worth a read, but it's got some highlight figures in there. And it said that 40% of design time is just spent locating and validating information. So forget whether it's 2D or 3D. You know, I spent my time on site. You've got two drawings, exactly the same number, the same revision, but they show slightly different things. You know, in one the man holds here, and one someone's moved it over there. And you spend time trying to work out which of those two is correct. Or maybe neither's correct. Maybe there's a third version floating around somewhere. The second key point was about entering information once and reusing it. So this is starting to go onto the BIM theme, where people will create something and it's then reused for lots of different purposes. So we have this pump that sits in the BIM MEP AUS system in your model. If that can be used by the cost planners, by the programmers, by the purchasers, it all starts to save money because you're reusing that information. And poor communication between systems, again, wastes a lot of money. So that's starting to get into things like BIM interoperability. You know, can I take a Revit file and put it into a Bentley application? Can I take a Bentley application and put it into an ArchiCAD file, and so on? And I put this in just to show, really, to sort of sum up where we are. Now, it's interesting, when I show this to owners, I always used to think naively the owners would see themselves at the top. But the owners always say they sit about the middle somewhere, and the main contractor sits at the top. You talk to the main contractor, they say no, they're on the bottom perch somewhere because they get screwed by the architect. There's all sorts of things, you know, we can all relate to where we sit on that chain. So BIM's a better way of doing it. Again, thinking about our own version of BIM, what relates to us. I've put the definition in. This is the simplest definition of BIM that I've found. I like it just because it is simple. There's lots of academic work about BIM, but it's really about the process, as has been said before, of generating and managing asset data through the life cycle. Now, as an industry, we get very excited by the kind of what some people call Hollywood BIM. You know, it's the moving images, it's that we sit down with clients and we show them, we walk through. It's all the clever, sexy stuff that looks good. It never really goes beyond that much. We're starting to go into construction, but we're not really integrated into construction yet. So this diagram up here really is trying to encapsulate that whole BIM process and emphasizing it really is about delivering asset information for users. So we've got all these pipes and ducts and fans going into a model, but importantly, it's about the data that sits behind them. So what can the client use long-term to get benefit? And what can we as contractors and designers get from that along the way? Paul was just talking about these different file formats as well. You know, as a contractor, you're faced with receiving all these different bits of information. And a typical design team will be using Revit, ArchiCAD, Bentley Mechanical, a whole range of different tools, you know, SketchUp. Next year there could be Google BIM or Google Mechanical BIM, or all these things are constantly coming onto the market. And it's important that project teams can use the best tool for the job. You know, it's very rare you can find one client that will say, right, we only use one package and only one version of that package. It's very difficult to do that. The Bentley approach is what we call federated models. And it's a very efficient way of working when you've got larger teams. So each discipline creates their own stuff, if you like, their models, their drawings, their spreadsheets. And in this environment, the important thing is that only the originator can change their content. So if the architect here is creating his walls, when he puts his models into the shared environment, you can't have the structural guy moving an architectural wall. Okay, so ownership has to retain with the originator. And it means you can bring those together, as Paul was just saying, for things like clash detection. We never clash a whole building in one go. In my mechanical services background, we'd do things by floor or by zone, or you'd clash a plant room or a riser. So what you want to do is be able to bring that different content together in different times, in different formats, for different purposes, but do it in a way that's managed. So going back to ensuring, if I'm bringing those different parts of the building together, I know that I've got the latest version. I've got the version that's correct for doing coordination. So it's very efficient. Again, just a few models. We all do our own thing. We've got the structures, the mechanical, electrical, piping, hydraulics, all doing our different version of a design submission for that